You were listening to episode 289 of the Game Deflators Podcast. My name is John, and I'm joined by Ryan.
Hey, everybody, here at the Game Deflators Podcast, we like to talk about games we've recently picked up, games we're currently playing, and waiter, there's some Final Fantasy in my fighting game in this week's Inflation Deflation Challenge.
So this week we played a little bit of Ehrgeiz on the PlayStation 1.
Ehrgeiz.
And, oh my God, dude, I hate you. We're going to go into that in our Inflation Deflation this week. But Ryan, let the people know what they're going to hear about today.
Yeah, so this week we're going to be talking a little bit about the D&D show. It rolls a crit failure to launch. The PS5 is actually selling less games but making more money. And finally, we'll take a look at the next wave of PlayStation announcements that fell flat this week.
And then also a little bit later in the episode here, after our pickups and all that good stuff, we're going to be talking to Jim of Crit HitCon. So he'll be on the line again to tell us about the event happening in Mesa this July. But before we dive into all of that, you can find us on the GameDeflators.com, our currently out-of-date website. I have not updated in several weeks. So, yeah, there's that.
As is tradition.
What was that?
I said as is tradition.
Okay, I thought you said extradition. I'm like, where the hell is that coming to play? You could find
We're
us
sending you out of the country, John.
Oh, man.
Finally got you.
No. Yep, finally got me. You can also find us on social media at Game Deflators on X, at The Game Deflators on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and YouTube, since I think that's considered a social channel, technically. We do have gameplay on there now. I'm going to try and make a concerted effort. Whenever I play a PS5 or PS4 game, I'm going to hit record, stream it. Not going to be commentating. That's just not really my thing if I don't have a camera on me or anything. But hopefully I can get some more video game recordings up. And yeah, so we'll see how that goes. But Bramble the Mountain King completed that, and that is on our YouTube right now. So go check that out. And of course, you'll listen to a podcast application or podcast app on a podcast application. So go ahead and give us a 5-star review, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Okay. Pickups. I made quite possibly the dumbest pickup I could have made this week, Ryan. I picked up
think so.
Oh, I think it's crazy. It's the Barad-dûr Lego set that just came out for Lord of the Rings. If you don't know what that is, it's Sauron's tower. Barad-dûr means Dark Tower. So it's the giant ass tower with the eye on it. Yeah, that's what I got. And it's when I say giant ass tower, it's like almost 3 feet tall.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be such a cool build.
I am strangely excited about this, and at the same time wondering, where the hell am I going to put this thing? I have no idea, dude. That's the worst part about it. Like, I've been looking for glass shelves, kind of thinking, okay, I can get a nice display case, put some good premier Lego sets in there. I can't find anything that is past like 15 inches height between shelves. I can't find anything from a depth perspective that's going to fit Lego sets that big. And then if I do display this in some capacity, it's going to have to go on top of the case. So I'm like, okay, you have like a 70-inch case and a 32-inch Lego set. So we're literally looking at 110 inches, like almost to the top of my ceiling for a Lego set display case. It's insane. I don't know how I'm going to approach this, but I'm going to build it and I'm going to put it somewhere and I'm going to enjoy it. And it's going to look cool. So that's where we're at with that. It also came with
develop like your own like Lego art room where you just have the Legos individually on their own stands, so you could 360 walk around them.
That'd be awesome. I don't anticipate getting into like crazy like buying of Lego. Like I have a bunch, but it's more for like the Mario stuff for when my kids are a little older to play with. I've been buying kind of the adult stuff every now and then. So like this one's a cool one. The Horizon Zero Dawn. I bought the Blacksmith one because that's pretty cool. And then I intend on getting the Rivendell set as well. And then we get the Harry Potter stuff because we have a Christmas Village that I think I've mentioned on here before. So my wife has those in particular. But I would like to display those and not have them like the Hogwarts Castle, for example. I don't want to have Hogwarts sitting in the closet all year long and then have to rebuild it every damn Christmas because it's a big ass piece I have to rebuild. It's in giant chunks, but I still have to go through all of the books and make sure like I'm actively piecing it back together Whereas if it sits in a case all year, not collecting dust because it's covered in glass, I can just kind of pull it out and put it where it needs to be during Christmas time and then put it right back. And it's,
You have so many cabinets, Sean. Maybe you can just like put it in the cabinets directly above where you display it.
You talking about my kitchen cabinets?
Yeah, just put it up in the kitchen cabinets.
Nah, there's not enough room, dude. I mean, the depth on those cabinets is probably good enough for it, but if I was to display it like above, nah, dude, like those cabinets are almost up to the ceiling, which is
No, I'm
crazy. Like,
just saying, like, out of sight. Like, just put it in your kitchen cabinets, and then when you need it, bam, they're right there.
oh, I see, I see. I don't, you know what? I don't know if I have any space in those cabinets. I think all the space is taken up. I have one actually. I have a lower cabinet, literally has nothing in it. So yeah, when I got my
Lego
new
cabinet.
kitchen, I put too many cabinets, I guess, because I have empty space in some of them. But outside of that, it also came with the Fell Beast, which is pretty cool. So it was a gift with purchase type of deal. And I'm happy I did it when I did, because that thing is going just kind of like the Mimic, right? The Mimic was going for like 140, 150. Yeah, so is this Fell Beast as well. So I'm happy I got my gift with purchase. I bought it like I literally logged on at 9 o'clock Pacific time, which was release time on the East Coast at midnight on June 1st. Logged in, was in a queue for however long, got out of that, bought it, was done with it, all finished. And then I also had enough points that I got a little spaceship too, which is kind of cool. So I have a little spaceman of a rocket. But that was my pickup. Now, as far as what I'm currently playing, I am still playing Alundra. This game is kind of pissing me off in a way so far. Like, it's a good game in terms of story, and I like the concept of this dungeon and diving in these different dungeons and clearing them, the puzzles and things. Like, I like that, right? Like, I think that's cool, and I like the overall gameplay. What I don't like is you have a save point in the main village you're at, and then you have a save point in whatever dungeon you go to. So your time going from the village to all the areas surrounding the dungeon to going into the dungeon to then progressing through the dungeon could be, I don't know, an hour. And if you happen to die before you find that save point, you start all over again. Right. So the lack of save points is really getting to me right now. And I found that out the hard way last night. I was about an hour and 20 minutes into a playthrough and completed almost every single part of his dungeon. Could not find the save point. I was like, I've got to look at a guide right now to see if there's a save point anywhere nearby. Well, so yeah, there was a save point and it was in a hidden area. Like, you'd literally have to throw a rock to jump on something else to then jump up to a hidden door to where your save point was in that dungeon. So it was like, go face the boss and potentially die or find that save point. Well, I had ran out of like healing herbs and things like that. So of course I died on the way to the save point and was like, turn off. Like, I'm done for the night. Hour and a half wasted, so kind of reminds me of when I played Cardia last year, and you go through these battles and you lose the battle, and it's like, now I got to start over and I got to listen to all the dialogue and all that again, or read all the dialogue. So kind of pissing me off the lack of save points, but I'm still enjoying the game for the most part. And then Bramble the Mountain King, just went ahead and completed that the other day with my wife. Fantastic game, absolutely loved it. It's based on Nordic fairy tales, got a lot of lore and stuff tied to it. It's follows kid Ole, who's searching for his sister, and she gets kidnapped by a troll, and you got to make your way to the mountain where the Mountain King lives to try and rescue your sister. And you have puzzles that you kind of go through, like minimal puzzles, nothing super crazy, and just various adventuring and a little bit of battle here and there. There's some boss fights with Nordic fairy tale monsters, and it was great. We enjoyed it. When we were all said and done, we were like, that was a great game. Like, that was 100% the type of game that we needed to play, and we enjoyed it. So I would highly recommend it. If you're not going to play it, go on our YouTube. It's the entire playthroughs on there. You can check it out and go watch it. So definitely would appreciate that too. And then subscribe, because
it looks
we'll
like
have
good,
more stuff down the road.
Fun.
Oh yeah, dude, it's good. So whenever you get a PS5, I will shoot that your way so you can play it. Yeah.
Woo.
How about yourself?
So this week I've been cleaning out my mom's house, and I was going through the entertainment center. She used to have this, where is it? Right over here, this red Nintendo Wii. So I was going through and I found a little bag, got me an old, one of those cardboard sleeve copies of Wii Sports and New Super Mario Bros. Wii. So hey, free pickups. Awesome.
Nothing better than free pickups.
Yeah, so I got those, and I probably won't be playing either of them anytime soon. That's for sure. But, we all got to keep the collection going however we can. And then other than that, this week I was checking out more Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. Still having a good time with that. It's not a pickup that I had, but a friend of mine actually got the Switch OLED, and it looks so good. I was actually going to go check it out today, but I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. But um, it it makes me want one, but it makes me really want to just wait for the next gen Switch and hope that it comes standard with an OLED to begin with, because man, it might be worth just like waiting out for an OLED refresh, but I don't know. It's going to be crazy. We'll see what happens when the next generation comes around for that Switch. I remember when the last one came out and we were like, well, we're doing this podcast now. Like, somebody's got to get in on this new generation so that we have like stuff to talk about.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the Switch too. I'm not getting an OLED anytime soon. Justin actually got one recently. And he got Sea of Stars and some other games. So it's funny, at Sea of Stars, he started playing it, and he's like, "Man, there's just a lot of dialogue. I don't know if I can get into this." Like 3 days later, he's like, "Yeah, I'm about 10 hours in."
Yeah, that's such an amazing game.
Yeah. But I'm right there with you. I'm not going to get an OLED. I'm going to wait till the 2 come, or whatever the next Nintendo console is. As long as it's backwards compatible, then that would be my next step, would be to trade in my existing Switch and then go ahead and get whatever new console is out there with backwards compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, well, that's all good stuff, man. And then what are you playing?
Just still playing some Paper Mario. Haven't really gotten too far. I'm in Bogley Woods, which is only like the second area. I'm just kind of taking my time going through it when I have time to sit down. Haven't really had a chance to sit down and play too much this week. I've been a lot busy with other stuff.
All good. All good. All right. So for our discussion this week, we actually have Jim from Crit Hit Con, who's going to be joining us again. We had Jim on a few weeks back. So Jim, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we had you on a few weeks ago to talk about Crit Hit Con. It's going to be happening this July out in Mesa, Arizona. Can you remind our listeners what Crit Hit Con is, where
Sure,
we can
absolutely.
learn more about it, when it is, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so Crit Hit is going to be Crit Hit 6, technically, is going to be July 6th and 7th at the Doubletree by Hilton Phoenix Mesa, which is a mouthful. It's anybody who's in Arizona and is in the Phoenix metro area. If you remember where the Fiesta Mall used to be, right off the 60, that's basically across the street. There's a really big hotel there, and that's where we're going to be. Tickets are $50 for the weekend. There's 1-day passes for Saturdays and Sundays are kind of tiered. And tickets are on crithitaz.com. And we have a big vendor hall that is free to shop. So there's going to be roughly 40 vendors, give or take. And there's no charge for that. You can just come in and enjoy like all the vendors. And there's going to be some demos and a couple of other things that we got planned for free for people just to hang out with us.
All good stuff. And we'll actually be there as well. So definitely excited for July, and it can't get here soon enough. Ryan, did you want to kick off our next question here?
Yeah, so talking about Crit Hit Con, and what is something what makes this year so different from your prior events? I mean, you said this is Crit Hit 6, so you've been doing this for a while. What's kind of been the big thing in the past, and then what are you guys doing this year to really kind of change things up or make it stand out?
So this year is different. So this is our 6th big Crit Hit. We've had other events that we've done. So I mean, technically we've done like 10 events probably, if you count all the smaller stuff. And then there's even little micro things that we've done, but
side quests.
Yeah, little side quests that we've done. But this is the 6th sort of iteration of the convention itself. There's a video somewhere on our Facebook page of one of our events that we called Winterborn, which I don't count in that number of 6, which was just like it was a themed event where we had like dinner and music and people fighting and armor and all kinds of stuff. But there's a video of me speaking right before the dinner where I describe Crit Hit in terms of like, sometimes you go like to like a concert, right? Like you'll go to like a big polished concert and there's, there's lights and it's professionally managed. And it's like the best sound system and there's visuals and there's all kinds of cool stuff. And it's just sort of like what you expect from like a top tier, your Taylor Swift kind of level people, right? And then you have your dirty punk show in like a sketchy part of town and like a sketchy bar and like you're not really sure how it's going to happen. That's Crit Hit. Like we're not like the big polished convention. We've never have been that. We're a tiny little punk show in a sketchy bar, except our sketchy bar happens to be a really nice hotel. But the metaphor still kind of holds, right? So what makes this one different actually is that every year, every time that we do this, something changes. Like one of the cool things about being a convention the size that we are, I've always said that, Crit Hit is not a revenue generating operation. It never has been. It was designed to spend money the stupidest way you can spend money on a convention. And unfortunately, we can't do that anymore because it used to be we rented suites, and that's where the games were held, were actually in suites. After COVID, that is almost cost prohibitively expensive. I'd have to charge like almost double, I think is what I figured for a badge. But it's always an evolving thing. It's always something we're trying something different, trying something new. One year I tried a whole thing that was like, pay what you want to get in. Like I tried that people didn't quite wrap their head around it. It was kind of weird, but I might try that again in later. But we always try something different. So this year is part of sort of that evolution. So this year we're really looking at the operation as a whole. So we're introducing things like trading card games, collectible card games. We're going to have some demos and some of that there. This is the first year we haven't done it with a Kickstarter. Normally we have the safety net of a Kickstarter and that's what pays for everything. And, the bulk of that is, badge sales and vendor booth sales and that sort of stuff. This year we're not doing that. So it's totally, we're just kind of out there without a net, which is a little scary. But evolving sort of the way that we do things, you're going to start to see some of the things if you've come to our events that, were some of the initial ideas that we had when we started Crit Hit start to make their way back. And I'm already kind of planning out how next year we can switch, because the biggest thing for me always has been how role-playing games are played. And it used, the model was for the longest time, the bulk of the RPG games were held in, in private suites and that kind of stuff. But in a world where you can't do that, like how do you do that? How do you do something special like that? Right. And so those are things that I think about, and you're going to start to see a little bit of that this year. And probably a lot more next year, but you're going to see the seeds of it. So it's going to be a little bit different. The other thing that's different that I'm super excited about is we just actually announced it on our Facebook yesterday, late last night, that we're going to have Artemis at our convention. Are you guys familiar with that?
No,
not actually.
Artemis is so, I forgot, this is a PG? I don't know if I can cuss or not, but anyway.
You can cuss.
Yeah, it's fucking rad. Like Artemis is so fucking rad, dude. Like, okay, so Artemis, what it is it's called a Starship Bridge Simulator, I think is what they call it. And so the concept of it is it's run on a server, and it is technically kind of a video game, but it's really, I classify it as an RPG. And here's why. When you sit down and play, you sit down at a console, you're part of a ship, right? You're part of a crew on a ship. Your computer that you're sitting in front of is the control panel to that part of the ship that you're responsible for. So if you're engineering, you have control of like how much power is going to life support and shields and all that stuff. If you're weapons, you're in charge of the weapons and scanning and all stuff, science, on and on. So it kind of mimics like a Star Trek kind of a ship. And that's all you see. You don't see anything else, right? Then there's like usually a projector or a TV that acts as sort of like the main screen. Like, on Star Trek, there's a main viewer that they see right in front of them. It mimics that so that you can see what's going on outside the ship. And there's one player who actually does not have a console, and that's the captain. And the role of the captain is to manage what's happening on the ship, because much like if anybody has ever been in the Navy, those ships operate off of people having to communicate with each other what is happening, because otherwise you can't make a good decision. So if you're engineering and we only have so much power, and weapons is asking for more power, like all that information has to get relayed to the captain. The captain has to kind of repeat those things back to each station, and so it's total chaos. And as you're playing it, like, it really feels like you're on a ship. It really feels like you're in charge of this thing, and it's such a great experience. So it used to be at Fan Fusion. They used to have it years and years ago, and it's kind of sputtered here and there in different venues. But the guy who runs it is super passionate about it. I'm already working on like ideas for next year, how to grow it even bigger and better. But we're going to have three full ship configurations. And I believe that's going to hold, we can do up to 24 people at a time.
Wow.
So how long does it take in between like battles and such?
So that's one of the things I've talked about, because it's kind of scenario based, but I'm guessing probably like an hour, 2 hours, maybe, 3 tops. We might even see if there's something we can do where it takes up almost like an RPG slot, so anywhere between 2 and 4 hours. And it is very cool. I'm very excited about that. So yeah, that's some of the stuff that's different. That's just like the tip of the iceberg. So yeah.
Nice.
That sounds really fun.
By the way, on the Kickstarter piece, it sounds, I think it's actually going to be better for you guys to not have the Kickstarter, because you don't have to pay out that money, to Kickstarter.
Yeah.
I think it'll offset at the end of the day, and your fans that are supporting that Kickstarter over the years, they're going to buy the tickets anyways, right? So I think the Kickstarter helps from an advertising standpoint, because you get that little bit of extra. But
yeah,
what is it, like 20%, 15-20% you got to pay?
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. Like it's a good chunk, and
it's a good chunk. Yeah.
When you're a small operation like this that runs as lean as we do, every little bit helps. And that was part of the reason why we didn't want to do it. Plus, post-pandemic, my wife and I really sat and thought about, what we wanted to do with this convention. And at one point we had sort of announced that we weren't going to do Crit Hit as a big convention anymore. We wanted to focus on smaller events that we had done before that we really, really enjoyed doing. And, but there's a couple things that are happening behind the scenes that, we're not ready to announce, but there's a couple things that were happening where we're like, well, maybe we should do a big convention again. And in a world where we're doing a quote unquote big convention, it was just kind of this idea of like, well, you know what, let's try it without the safety net. And if it fails, it fails. If 10 people show up and everyone's angry at the end of this, then it should naturally progress to not existing anymore. Or, if it does okay enough to warrant another year, we'll do it another year and we'll announce some other things. But we really wanted it to sort of stand on its own legs and stand on its own merits. With that being said, we ran into all kinds of crazy challenges because we came right out of like 2 major conventions back to back into trying to plan Crit Hit, which is almost impossible. Like it's so hard.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah. When I was running my own con, I was working my standard day job and was actually doing event planning on the side for all these events, and then having to do my convention planning, which my convention was out of state. So I totally feel you, dude.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. And it's not a boohoo, oh, poor me. No, but it is, a logistical problem. And
for sure.
Like some conventions, that's what they do for a living, right? Yeah. That's their full-time job. A lot of sort of your smaller conventions like us, anything under, a couple hundred people, it's not. It's a labor of love. So between we had Game On Expo last year in August, and then we had Game On Expo again in March, and then rolling into Crit Hit in July. And in that time, we developed, we rewrote our scheduling software, Congen, from the ground up, basically. And it's just been crazy. Plus my day job, which is unbelievably busy anyway. So,
yep, I feel you, dude. I definitely know it's not a boohoo. It's tough. And even, I mean, people understand, like, even like I was running probably about 2 to 2.5 K convention for folks to come in, and I mean it's a lot, especially if you're running lean like we did as well. So I totally feel you.
Yeah.
So question for you, as far as special guests, do you have anybody coming out this year?
Yes,
you're excited about?
Yeah. So we have Skeeter Green coming out. So Skeeter has done a lot of stuff in the OSR world. So sort of like traditional D&D kind of stuff. He did a lot of stuff with Frog God Games on their Swords and Wizardry line. And then he sort of started off his own little imprint where he's made some really cool products for OSC, which is Old School Essentials. Well, I'm sorry, no, it's Swords and Wizardry, but a lot of people just kind of play it in Old School Essentials because they're essentially very close. But Call of Cthulhu, he's made scenarios for that, where he's worked with Luke Gygax for GaryCon. So he's made like 2 Call of Cthulhu adventures for GaryCon. He's done stuff for Mutant Crawl Classics. So he's just this really cool designer who makes adventures in almost in an old school style, but with a lot of like modern sensibilities about like how the game should be experienced. So it's not, you won't see a ton of combat in his games. It's a lot of like, you got to think your way out of these problems. You can always sit there and bash things because he's a big fan of that too. But there's a fair amount of problem solving, really interesting, weird situations. And he's just a cool guy all around. And he's been out to our convention a couple times. And he's a good friend and supporter of the convention. So it just made sense this year to kind of like, hey, let's do a thing on you this year since you kind of hang out anyway. So yeah, he's flying up. I believe he lives in Seattle, so he's going to be coming in, and that should be fun.
Nice,
cool. So I mean, good guess, awesome stuff. What kind of like panels or game sessions are you particularly looking forward to? I know like getting out and playing at the con is a really important thing for you. So like, what's got you excited?
I never get to play. Yeah. I stupidly created a convention to try and run games that I love. And I think I've managed to run just like a handful of games over the past so many years.
You don't get to do anything at cons if you run it. Yeah.
But
Brian doesn't
know. Well, last year I got to run a play test of a game that I was supposed to put out this year if we hadn't done another big convention. So maybe it'll be out by next year. But I got to run that. So I'm probably going to do another demo of my game called No Strings, No Masters, which is basically, if you guys are like horror movie fans, particularly old horror movies, there's a old series called Puppet Masters, which is about these little evil puppets, right? And they've made like a gazillion of them. This role-playing game, you play as the puppets, trying to survive in a world that was not made for you. And you have to stick together as a family and take care of each other. So I'm kind of taking a lot of the themes from Puppet Master and turning them a little bit. So I'm running that. One of the things, besides Artemis is a big deal. Hopefully I'm going to try and play Artemis.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm going to try and play because I love that game. But I am going to run are you guys familiar with like D&D Epic games?
Mm-mm.
No, so they usually run at conventions. So. Yeah, so Epic Games, the format goes like this. There's usually kind of like a meta plot, and then there'll be several tables that are all playing in that same game, but doing different missions in the scenario, right? So one group is in charge of, infiltrating the castle. Another group is in charge of, delivering a message to somebody in a precarious situation, that sort of thing. He's turned out to be one of my closest friends. He started off as an attendee, and over the last couple of years, we've actually become very, very close friends. My friend Sean was doing a panel at Phoenix Fan Fusion because he's a giant Power Rangers nerd. He loves Power Rangers. So I'm sitting at his panel, and he's talking about Power Rangers, and him and his friends are all talking about various Power Rangers games, board games, video games, all that. And they stumble upon the role-playing game because they played it. And my ADHD brain just kind of took over, and I kind of blurted out. I was like, what if I wanted to run a game with Transformers, Power Rangers, and G.I. Joe?
Oh, man.
And he's like, actually, you can't do that because the company who makes it owns a license to all. I knew that already. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because I thought that's a cool idea. And then he drops the bomb of they actually make a scenario where all three of them are playing together versus a villain. And I was like, And people like in the panel like, oh, and somebody's like, I want to play that. I was like, I want to run that. And so next thing you know, like there's a couple of us yelling in this panel, and we're like, we're going to do this. All right, we're doing it at Crit Hit. So here we are, prepping for an epic game where there's going to be Power Rangers on one table, Transformers on another, G.I. Joe on another, fighting a common bad guy that's kind of an amalgamation of all three of those franchises bad guys put together.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So that's fun. We're probably going to do that on the Sunday of Crit Hit, and I'm looking forward to that because it's so wild. It's such a crazy bonkers idea that I love it. So
nice. Well, so I have a question for you that I'll put at the very end of this episode, or not end the episode, end of our interview here. But first, before we dive into that, can you remind us again how much are tickets and where can people buy them?
Oh, sure. Tickets are $50. They're gonna for the weekend. You can get them on crithitaz.com. Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, so I'm gonna put you on the spot, and I'm sure you'll put me on the spot in return. D&D or Pathfinder? Which one you got?
The
silence is great.
Yeah. Basic expert D&D. So that's the old red box D&D.
Okay.
Yeah. So
specific edition even.
Yeah, specifically. Yeah. So so if we're talking like 5th edition Pathfinder, to me those are the same game almost.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate and I love that I live in a world where D&D, we were talking right before we started recording, like there's movies, there's TVs, there's like a streaming channel on Amazon that's nothing but like D&D related stuff. I love that I own D&D socks that, like, if I could go back and tell 12-year-old me that I would live in a world where I can just go buy D&D socks and a coffee mug whenever I want. And it's not like it's a rare, hard thing to get. I just got to go down the street and buy it. That's bizarre. And so I love that that's the world that I live in.
The mainstream nature of it right now is absurd. I mean, I remember like before 5th edition came out, right? It wasn't where it is today in terms of the mainstream notoriety. I feel it picked up a lot of casuals, such as myself, such as I think Ryan as well, over time. And now we've become like, I've got, I think, every 5th edition book.
Yeah. And that's amazing. Yeah. Like that is so crazy to me. Like that is so it's just a bizarre thing, but I love it. I love that people are learning this hobby that I love so much. Like I love this hobby. I love so many things about it.
Now, what do you like so much about like that specific edition of D&D?
So, I'm not a fan of 5th edition. I'm personally not a fan of that particular rule set. I'm not a particular fan of the way that Pathfinder does things because it was built off of 3.5 and there were some issues there. I do like the way that Pathfinder 2nd edition has tried to become its own thing with their action economy is super interesting. I love the way that they do crits. That's brilliant, I think. But the thing that I think both of those games have that I don't like, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on this, is there's this thing that's been going on. You guys are brand new to the hobby, to D&D specifically. And there's this thing, and I'm wondering if you guys have heard this, because I hear it over and over and over again, that 5th edition is the easiest version of D&D that's ever existed. And that's why it's so popular. That's one of the reasons why it's so popular. Would you guys?
That's what I've always heard.
Yeah. Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that I've always heard too. And I would buy in as a reason.
But that said, having played games like Neverwinter Nights, for example, which uses the older editions, I think it uses the 3.5 mechanics, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
In Neverwinter, I mean, is it difficult to track in a video game like Neverwinter? Sure. If you were to get me at a table and kind of map it out and say, hey, here's your character sheet, here's how things are going to happen in terms of attacks and, keeping track of different abilities and things of that nature and stats, I think I'd pick it up. I think we're all smart enough to be able to understand some of those older mechanics and get through with it, with no issue, So I would buy in, like Ryan said, 5th edition probably is the easiest D&D. to have learned maybe from the get-go. But if you're kind of playing 5th edition, you decide, oh, I want to play like 1st edition, or I want to play 3.5, whatever it may be, I think you could technically get a group of 5th edition players, teach them those mechanics, and move forward with that rule set with no problem.
Yeah, me and my group did a little, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 sessions, tried to get started on 3.5, and there was a lot about it that I liked, but I mean, it definitely had a lot more nuance to it. Like, I was trying to like balance all of my like feats and everything, and like this feat will give you bonus stats to these stats, and then other bonus stats to these stats if you have a minimum. And it's like I'm like level like 3 or 4, and I'm rolling like 30s on my persuasion.
So yeah, and that got kind of ridiculous, right? But at the same time, don't we see some of that today where like there's entire YouTube channels on how to optimize a character and how to do this build and that build, where it is a very technical, crunchy breakdown of the mechanics of D&D and how to combine essentially feats, right, together.
Well, and then throw in your items, right?
Yeah.
Your magic items that are boosted. I think I've got what am I running right now? I've got an artificer who rolls like, I think the minimum he rolls is like a 20 on stealth.
That's
sleight of hand. Yeah, it's like stupid. And they're saying like artificers are like the new rogues essentially, you know. And then you throw on like your magic item, like, you know, thieves tools +2 or whatever I have, plus expertise and things like that. I could roll as high as like a 28 or 30 at my level. And I think I'm level 10.
Oh
yeah,
that is so bonkers to me. That is just stupid. So wild.
Yeah.
Now 5th edition, it is easier than 3rd edition. It's definitely probably a little easier than 4th edition. 4th edition was a little complicated, but also very interesting. But both of those games, kind of, you can tie them back to that 3rd edition. Excuse me, sorry about that. You can tie them back to that 3rd edition, and I would say that like 5th edition is just a better version of 3rd edition. It is a cleaner, more logical version, right? They took a lot of the sort of extra stuff and put it away.
Yeah.
But even at like 5th edition, right? Your player's handbook is what, like 180 pages or something like that? 160 pages?
Roughly, yeah. 150, 175, I think.
Yeah, it's somewhere in there, right? Basic expert, 68 pages.
Damn.
68 pages of rules. That includes dungeon master information, a couple monsters, how to stock a dungeon. So there's that one book has everything in it for both DMs and players,
including like races and classes and all the build. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. 68 pages. And if you look at the character sheet, there's almost nothing on it. There's your stats and your gear and a couple places for your weapons and stuff like that. And that's it. There's no skills. There's no any of that stuff because the game didn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that somewhere along the line, things got so complicated that the game became a game in itself. Like it's all metagame now. People always talk about like how metagaming is bad. And I'm like, compared to what? Everybody metagames. The whole game is metagaming. You walk into that table, not just kind of like, let's see what happens, but you have a specific build with a specific goal. And there's all these things that you know that you can do. And everyone else in that table is optimized around you, just like you're optimized around them.
Well, then you have your fellow GMs that play with you too, right? Mm-hmm. Who know different enemy stats and things of that nature. So now you got to mix it up even further, right?
What if there's a different way to play it? What if there was a way to play it where you don't have any of those skills? You don't have anything that's optimized. You're very squishy. Fighting is actually super dangerous because if you really stop and think about it, you know, a bunch of humans and maybe a couple of dwarves and some elves, like going into a cavern with creatures, right, that are powerful, that are strong, is dangerous. But let's take that away. Let's suppose you didn't have monsters. You know, what if you made a game where it was like people and you go into a bear cave and there's nothing but a bunch of bears in there, right? A bear in D&D is relatively easy to take out. But if you really think about like a couple humans going in there trying to fight bears with like swords and stuff like that, like good luck. It's not going to end well. It's a horror story at that point, right?
Yeah.
So old D&D, I like to tell people that the old style of playing, games were more, they're really centered around almost a escape room type experience. The GM would present problems, like you have to get from here to there, and you're in this kind of environment, and here's the things that are around you. How do you do that? And so instead of relying on skills and powers, I'm gonna go ahead and shapeshift into an eagle and fly over. You can't do any of that stuff. You have to figure out, all right, we have like rope and like a donkey. Like, how are we going to do this? And so everyone has to work together to do it. But in the meantime, maybe a couple of orcs attack, and you're like, oh, great. Like, we don't want to fight these guys, like, because they'll kill us. We have to run away. Running away was a big part of the game because you had to figure out how to survive and tactically get to the place that you had to go. I love that style of gaming. I think that's something that people are starting to slowly rediscover as you hear people talking about. I love that the industry now, like the hobby now, has like buzzwords sometimes, and sometimes they bug me a little bit, but I also kind of love that it exists. But people always talked about immersion for a long time. That was like a kind of a buzzword, but now they're talking about exploring and running games where you discover what happens as you play. And that's how D&D used to be played. And that is such a cool thing.
Yeah, and I like your main thoughts on this too, about like the squishy players not having tons of crazy abilities that get around and like make solutions easy. And that's something that I face as a GM. And Ryan, you've seen it obviously. And what I try to do to kind of mitigate that amongst our players in the group, and like find magic item, I think is one, or detect magic or whatever it is, right? Like I have had that spammed on me so many times. It's like, okay, how do I effectively hide certain magic items, right? How do I do things to kind of circumvent that particular issue of like, well, I'm going to spam, this cantrip because I can every time, right? Like that shouldn't be the way it's played, right? It shouldn't be easy. It should be like, let's find a solution as to what's happening. Or like, oh, you try to get into this, oh, well, I have like a 35 lockpick. Oh, well, guess what? It's a magic lock, right? Like there's things that are happening that are not going to let you do it. Start building in more traps. Like that's something that I haven't necessarily seen in some of the campaigns I played in recent years, that there's not a lot of traps, right? There's not a lot of surprises happening. And
nobody's buying the 10-foot pole anymore.
What's that?
I said nobody's buying the 10-foot pole anymore.
No, but there's other ways. Like you do plates, you can do like high dexterity checks to, well, you happen to open up this treasure chest because you're a greedy rogue, and all of a sudden poison spray comes out, and hey, guess what? You're not avoiding that poison spray. You're poisoned now. Like there's little things like that I think need to be built back into the game. And some of it comes down to, sometimes you have players complaining, oh, I don't like that happened to my character.
So, well, that brings up an interesting thing that happens then. So like Ryan, you're more of a player, right?
I've done both sides, yeah.
Both sides?
Pretty evenly.
Do you think that where you have to, like, if you're playing in a game and you know that the John is trying to hide magic from you, right? Or trying to hide magic items from you, right? Because he knows that you guys have detect magic, you can find these items really easily. Do you think that maybe creates almost a GM versus player situation where it's the GM actively working against the player's abilities?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a situation where it's like, everybody wants what they want, but like the way to get there is really where the misalignment is happening. And I mean, sometimes I'm on like John's side with this too, like even as a player, like we're playing in a Strixhaven campaign, and it's like, I mean, I guess you could use detect magic, but we're in a freaking magic college. Like, I'm assuming there's magic everywhere you look. Like, good luck having that really help us out in this situation.
Yeah, it's trying to detect like a radiation in the middle of a nuclear power plant. Like,
yeah, the walls are glowing, the whole building's glowing, like, and those are things I've tried to do too, right? Like, oh yeah, you're detecting magic for like looking for a particular item, and a problem with detect magic is I think it tells you what type of item you're looking at too, right? So it's like such a cheap move in a way. It's like I might have a ring hiding somewhere of like, I don't know, some sort of ring kind of chilling out that has magic on it. And somebody's like, oh yeah, I can detect magic, and I see what type of magic it is. So I'm going to like beeline straight to that box because I know that's where it's hiding.
So the old school style of playing gets rid of that, solves that problem, or never had that problem, because magic was super rare. It didn't work very often. And it was mostly just kind of, you had to take your little squishy people that didn't have a lot of, abilities written down on paper. It was mostly player defined skill. So old books actually talk about this particular adventure is for skilled players. Make sure that your players are skilled players, meaning not the characters, but the players themselves have to have a knowledge of how to think around problems and get used to that kind of style of gaming. You can't throw this particular dungeon on because there's too many hard situations to think your way out of. But somebody who knows what they're doing can be a very skilled player and survive these types of adventures. That's the old school way of playing. And there's so many games now that have taken that sort of idea and taken them to totally different directions, totally interesting mechanical things that happen in the game. Morkborg is a really simple game that does kind of a lot of the same things. Forbidden Lands, Dragonbane, those are two games right off the bat that solve all those same things. One of my favorite games in the world is Mouse Ritter, where you play tiny mice with swords, right? It's one of my favorite games in the world because it is old school D&D. You are a tiny mouse in a giant world. A cat is like a dragon, right? But you have, in that game, the creator said something that really stuck with me. He said, if you're rolling dice, you're in a failed state. And what that means is, if at any point you're picking up the dice in Mouse Ritter or the game that it's based off of, which is called Into the Odd, if you're picking up dice to roll, that means you guys have failed already. Now you're just trying to survive, because you should have been able to think your way out of that situation without rolling dice, just using your equipment and what your character is and the environment.
I do think I need to take my GMing more to that kind of level that you're mentioning, right? Like, in my opinion, D&D is supposed to be hard. It's not hard, but it's supposed to be enjoyable, but it's supposed to be challenging, right?
It's jarring. It's jarring because I've taken people who've only played 5th edition. I've had them play Mouse Ritter, and the first thing they'll do is to go charge to something. And I tell people right off the bat, like, do not go running into a fight because it is deadly. There's a really good chance you will not walk away from one battle. So don't do it. And so they'll try and do that a couple of times and get beat up a little bit. And then, they learn real quick not to do that. And to see players, look at their character sheet. And then when they first look at it, they think there's nothing there. So they don't understand what they have to do. But then as they sort of play a little bit longer, they start looking at the character sheet, not because they're looking for things that their characters can do, but they start looking at, like, wait, what do I have? Oh, I got this hook. Okay, I'm going to use this hook. You have a rope? Cool. We're going to climb that thing so people don't see us. Let's do that. And so you see them start working together in these sort of problem-solving scenarios. And when combat does happen, it is such a big deal. It is so dramatic. It is so hard. Everything is like you're scraping to survive. But the victories are equally measured by how hard it is. So the harder it is to get to, that place where you can get the gold or get the item that you came here for, the sweeter it's going to taste amongst those players, and the more they're going to cheer because they had to work and earn it and not just push a button on their character sheet.
Nice. And I guess to close out here, because I think we can go for
hours
on this topic. If we just kept going, we'll have to do another full-blown episode. But you'd mentioned on squishiness characters, making challenging, making those battles exciting, things of that nature. One thing that I've actually tried to do for the campaigns I've run is every battle I try to set up, if there's a key battle, it's considered on creature rating as deadly on there, mainly because of all the magic and the items and things of that nature that people have. And I'm going to blind a boss.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The boss can't see anything now, right? Yep. So it's like, how do I make this as difficult as possible? So it is a challenge and it is fun, and it does have you at the edge of your seat. And when you finally take that final blow, you're like, we did it, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's how it really should be.
Yeah, and that makes things fun. Like I said, we can go on this for hours, but yeah, that's sort of my rant. Like I play older style games or new games that emulate that old style, where games are more about thinking your way through things, talking your way out of situations versus a bunch of things that I have to memorize what they do mechanically. Yeah. So that's my favorite type of games. And those are the kinds of games that I built Crit Hit on. So we'll tie it back in. Like that's, come out and play some of those games. Try something different. You never know. You might find something that you go like, this is my jam. I'm going to do this.
Well, we'll have you on again before Crit Hit to give us any final updates on the event. And, cool. Hopefully we can, if it's not before Crit Hit, maybe it's after, we'll have a deeper discussion on RPGs and games in general and just go down a rabbit hole.
Absolutely. Cool. That'd be fun.
Jim, thanks again for coming on. We definitely appreciate it, and we'll catch you later.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Well, it's always good having Jim on. Definitely appreciate Crit HitCon and the folks there, and can't wait to go to that event. It's going to be a lot of fun. Sticking on the theme of Dungeons and Dragons and RPGs, so my article today, Dungeons and Dragons live action series not going forward at Paramount Plus will be revamped and shopped by Hasbro. So this is Nelly Andreeva, yep, at Deadline. New, I don't know, it's one of those things that popped in my Google feed, and I was like, oh, that's actually pretty interesting. I think I should throw it in for the podcast this week. So basically, Paramount Plus had, approved and said, hey, we're going forward with like an 8-episode season of a live action D&D to kind of tie in this whole like world of honor amongst thieves and all this other good stuff, and really kind of expand out that universe. And then decided, hey, we're not going to do that anymore. So really, that's the big news at the end of the day. So if you had been looking forward to that and you didn't know about this happening, it's going to be on hiatus for a little bit as Hasbro is shopping it around. They technically do own the property in general and all the rights to this. So they 100% can continue on with this pilot and however it was going to be created with other production companies out there, other ways to distribute the series and so on. They did have, I think it was E1, I think was the studio, but they ended up selling to Lionsgate. They were the ones that were in the process of, creating this new series. They're no longer there. So that'll be part of that process, right? Like we got to find somebody to actually make it. We got to find somewhere to distribute it. So it's going to be a bit, but they are fully committed to doing this. And I'm excited, man. I really want to see a D&D show and something that, we kind of have like the Critical Role show animated, but I really want to see a live action show. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things that I've heard people talk about before, and I tend to kind of agree with that opinion that like D&D is great, but it's not necessarily, I don't know, I don't think it's ever really going to be big enough to carry a mainstream audience for like a live action show. I mean, even like the Rings of Power was like, I mean, that was a huge success for Amazon at first, but I don't really think many people are too much talking about it now. And I mean, that has a lot of, brand recognition, and it's not that D&D doesn't, but D&D just doesn't carry a lot of, I don't know, like the villains and the creatures are iconic, but there's not like a Luke Skywalker. There's not like a main character of D&D that everybody's going to like know and get behind. Like all the D&D characters are just kind of like your everyday, anybody would roll up this character, and it's really, I don't know. The movie was good. I liked the movie, and I thought that the movie had a lot of successful, D&D elements in it. And I think that they did really good with like, here's, a cast that's a party and you're seeing how they're getting the party together to do what they're going to do. But I mean, that was not a commercial success. So, I mean, a big full budget movie with recognizable star power versus a show that's going to cost so much money. And I mean, even if you do get like really good actors in there, I just don't know that they're going to be enough to carry D&D as a franchise. And I think a lot of it is just the mainstreamness of it. Like, I think that the like Legend of Vox Machina, I mean, all the Critical Role people are going to know that and be in on that. So I think you need to shoot for niche, and like niche is just not like big budget, full on like Amazon production or something like that, like what you would imagine Hasbro really wants from this. So I would be interested to see it. Whether or not it would actually be successful, I don't really have a lot of faith in that.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. I mean, the thing to kind of look at with D&D, right, is you don't necessarily need to have like a hero character. It's more so on like the ability of D&D to create stories, right? Like that's kind of the central plot point, right? It's like you've got all these different adventures, you got all these things that could come from Dungeons and Dragons. There's not a centralized character, but to your point, there are like centralized villains. So if you do have a villain that can season over season be the main character, of that, then, kind of like, let's just say Thanos, right, from Marvel. Not that there's no other Marvel characters, but like that's the central point villains. So like, over those Avengers movies, that's who you kind of recognize as like, this is the big bad guy. You could do that theoretically at D&D and have these characters that organically grow with the audience as the show moves forward. Because like, yeah, I'm not going to know who John Smith is, who happens to be a rogue and a human, but over the course of a couple seasons, I learned to like that character and kind of grow with that character as they progress in their adventure and fight against this recognizable big bad character.
Yeah, but Marvel is recognizable characters. Like, nobody
yeah.
was going to go see a Thanos movie until they made 3 Iron Man movies, 2 Captain America movies, a couple of Hulk movies, a couple of Thor movies. Like, those are the pulling in points. And it's like, it's a rogue.
They are.
The rogue guy.
But that's the thing. You have to have the organic growth, right? Like D&D, it's mainstream right now. You have critical successes like Critical Role. I guess pun intended on that critical piece. The movie, to your point, yes, from a commercial standpoint, was a flop. I think it made like barely enough money to cover everything, the budget. But people liked it, right? Like it was a good movie. So I think if you have that as like your entry point, and you also need a distributor who's going to amp it up like crazy, right? Like Amazon, I think, is a perfect home for something like this. Being able to take new IPs like The Boys, taking something like Wheel of Time that nobody knew a damn thing about, and like amping it out to be this like major.
Well, has there been a second season of that?
Yeah, there's a second season of it.
Was it popular? Like, I mean, even like the 3rd season of The Witcher didn't do that great.
On the 3rd season of Witcher is because Netflix kind of screwed things up with that. And then you also had what's his face ended up leaving and changing actors. That's a whole flop in itself.
Well, and that's all the thing. Like Henry Cavill was like the guy who was going to be there the most for the series and wanted good things for it.
But they changed source material.
Corporate meddling is never going to cease. And I think that, we've seen what Hasbro tried to even do with the OpenGL. Like,
yeah, but that's where D&D's different.
Into the ground.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing: The Witcher has source material. And Henry Cavill wanted to stick to the source material. D&D, yeah, it's got source material, but it's open to interpretation. Like different stuff can happen. So, like D&D fans, like hardcore fans, if they see the elements of D&D in there, they're going to be hyped for it. They're going to have fun. They're going to want to see what happens with Vecna or some other like crazy like red dragon, like Thundershot, for example. When I saw him in a movie, I flipped out because we had Thundershot in your campaign, right? Very like minute piece, but it was fun for D&D fans. And so if it's an adventure, show of some sort, and it's good enough and it's engaging and people are going to have fun watching it, it's going to be a success for your non-D&D fans. It's going to be good for your D&D fans because they recognize it as like the different like key elements and characters of D&D. But as long as the story's fun, it's going to be successful. I feel like you just have to, I think a company like Amazon could take that to the next level. Like how many times did you purchase Amazon packages in the last year and you saw Rings of Power or you saw The Boys or you saw something like advertising all over like your boxes or on your Prime account, things of that nature? Like Amazon does a good job amping up their shows. So I think that's the perfect home, in my opinion, for Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
So we'll see. I mean, it may not even happen. They may shop this around and decide, no, we're not going to move forward. We want to cut 1,000 more employees. That's what ends up happening. So we'll see. Well, okay. We went into marketing there a bit. Let's kind of go back into your next article here.
Yeah. So this week, I just got a little short one here. This is by my MG staff of MrGamers.com. So this is just a little breakdown of a little chart that was put out there that shows the side-by-side of the PS4 versus the PS5 for kind of like the growth and spending in comparison. So for full game content, the PS5 is actually trailing the PS4 at about 12%, but they've made 176% increase in content and add-ons. So it's a very different generation that we have so far with the PS5. A lot of that probably being due to the extended cross-gen timing and not having as much brand new, ready to go, everybody wants to buy it content and new games out, plus all these live services where, instead of needing to buy a whole new game, well, I could just use that $70 and buy microtransactions and skins and whatever else for these other games that I already have and I'm already playing with all my friends all the time. So it's interesting to see that, side by side, the PS5 is at 731 million and the PS4 at 580 million. So it's like a significant difference there. Obviously, there's some other vectors in there. I mean, peripherals aren't too different. Services have increased a little bit, but it's mostly that content and add-ons for games as opposed to new game sales. So we always kind of talk about some of the math here, and I just wanted to bring that up as something to look at, because really where we're at now, I still don't feel like the PS5 is really popping off that hard. Like, I was listening to an Arlo video the other day. If you don't know Arlo, he's this blue furry puppet that does a bunch of Nintendo content, but other gaming content too. He's like excited to buy his like second or third PS5 game, I think he said. Like, the only thing he really got before that was Demon Souls, and that's a remake and a launch title. And there's only a few games that I'm really interested in. I mean, as soon as I get a PS5, I definitely want to play more Returnal, and I want to play Cyberpunk because I've never touched it because I was waiting for everything to be done. So those are the two biggest things that I really want to play on the PS5, and only one of those is even a PlayStation exclusive.
So looking at that money, I mean, one thing that kind of strikes me is, where does it all factor into this, is the roughly 20% increase in game prices as well, right?
Mhm.
Like, so when they say 12% less revenue, I wonder how much of that's attributed to the fact that games are now $70 kind of out the gate as opposed to 60. And in some cases, like your indie games that were sitting at 30 are now 40, right?
Mhm.
So if you've effectively boosted your prices up like 20% across the board for the most part, that's likely going to be a contributing factor as to why they're not selling fully in game. And then people are kind of picking and choosing, like, okay, it's kind of like, let's think of it this way. When you were a kid and your parents said, okay, we're going to go get you a video game, right? Like, let's just say you were fortunate enough to have that. It was, you're getting one game. So you had to kind of, as a kid, say, all right, what do I want to play? And knowing I'm not going to get one for a while, what am I going to be able to play for a while and enjoy? So people are, a little more financially strapped right now. People are losing jobs. Prices have gone up on game consoles. Food has gone up. Like, everything's gone up in price. So people are making like decisions as to what they want to do. And if that means, hey, I'm enjoying Call of Duty, or I'm enjoying this FIFA game, or whatever it may be, and it's going to cost me an extra $15 to enjoy it more versus $70 to go buy something new. I mean, it seems kind of obvious, right? That's the
Yeah.
direction they're going to go, is to get DLC to enjoy something that they're already enjoying and getting the most bang for their buck out of that. So that's kind of what I like when I saw your chart. That's kind of what I thought right off the bat. Like, there's got to be some like external circumstances that are kind of tying into that overall decrease of 12% full game content sales. So
for sure.
Yep.
And then,
well, I can go in the next one here. Talking PlayStation State of Play for May 2024. So all the biggest PS5 announcements and games. So this is GameSpot, and it is Jason Finelli. So I don't know if you've got the list up or if you want me to pull it up.
Yeah, I got them written down here. So I'll just run through them real quick, and then we can talk about the ones we want. So they showed off a bunch of content for Concord. We got to see God of War Ragnarok for the PC port, Dynasty Warriors Origins, Infinity Nikki, Ballad of Antara, Skydance's Behemoth, Alien Rogue Incursion, Marvel Rivals, Where Winds Meet, the Until Dawn remake, a showing for Path of Exile 2, the Silent Hill remake, Monster Hunter Wilds, and to close it all off, Astrobot, which is probably the most talked about and well-received thing that was shown at the whole showcase, I would say. I mean, right off the bat, when I watched this, and it took me a minute to remember Concord, because before, I think all we got was like this really like, kind of iridescent, like outside of a ship flying through space, and then like an inside shot of like some food on a table. And it was like just the dumbest, like nothing 15 seconds you'd ever seen when they showed it off for the first time, like last year or the year before. I don't remember how long ago it was exactly, but it was just like everything that everybody complains about. It was like quippy Marvel, off-brand Guardians of the Galaxy mixed with, a hero shooter like Overwatch, and it's just more of this like AAA schlock that is obviously something that 5 years ago everybody was like, oh my god, we got to make these hero shooters, we got to make these live service games, like get cracking, here's a blank check, make it happen. And now that time has evolved and we've gotten further along, nobody cares, nobody wants to see this anymore. People want to see something different. Like, we're over this trend, we're over these character types, we're over this type of quippy conversations that you get from those Marvel movies, and that's just really all anybody got from it. I mean, I don't even play any of these kind of games, but there was nothing really spectacular other than, just the pretty CG that we got to see. And I mean, the in-game stuff looked good too, but it's just like, I don't know, I can be a guy that runs around and throws out a health pad, or I can be a guy that can jump really high and shoot a sniper. Like, it doesn't do anything for me.
I think having watched it, like initial vignette of the different characters, I would want a game focused on that. I the
Like, if it was
multiplayer,
really
like,
a Guardians of the Galaxy situation where it's like,
yeah,
here's this band of like interesting characters that you'll get to meet and develop. And they did
yeah,
say that they're doing like a weird side thing where like every week they're going to have little like cutscenes and stuff that come out so that you get to know these characters deeper, and it
but
kind
just
of
give me a
unfolds a
game.
story. Yeah, just make that
Yeah,
the game.
yeah. Like, as I'm sitting there, like, I liked it, like that vignette and like the character development, and I don't remember the names offhand, but I think One Off was the only one I remember, the robot. But just kind of watching that, I was like, man, I kind of wish that this was a straight up game, and I was just following these characters and going on a giant space adventure with them. Like, that to me would have been cool. Like, I'd be
Hmm.
okay with that. The 5v5, like, I kind of like 5v5 multiplayer. Like, that would be my preference over like all these battle royales that are out there.
Yeah,
Um, I would almost like the team deathmatch style if I was to play this game. And it looked good overall, but you're right, like,
it
it's
didn't
a
look
few
like
years
anything
ago.
fresh.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the big thing. And like, even the characters and like the abilities and things like that, like nothing really stood out to me as like, man, I really got to play this game.
Hmm.
So, um,
The only other
the
things that
other,
really stood out to me, sorry,
no, go
uh,
on, go on.
I thought Skydance's Behemoth looked really interesting. It's going to be a PSVR 2 title, so it was good to see some representation for that piece of hardware there. Um, I mean, everybody's always wanted to see what Shadow of the Colossus would look like in, first person VR, and this gives you some of that scale. I mean, just big, giant monster stomping around, but you're also, a guy with a sword and a shield fighting regular guys too in this like crazy, Arctic North kind of area. And it looks, I mean, very impressive. I mean, I've not really tried PSVR 2, but I hear that it's a really good headset. So I'm hoping that this will be a good shot in the arm for both VR games in general, but specifically for, you know, new creative next level. Like, let's get real VR gaming underway to where it's going to start, selling units and moving people into that space to want to play these.
Yeah, so looking at the list you got here, uh Dynasty Warriors to me, I was like, once you played one Dynasty Warriors game, I feel like you've played them all,
Yeah, there's a
right?
million of those Muso games
Yeah, there's
already. You
so
can play
many.
it in any flavor you want. You want Gundam, you want One Piece, you want Zelda. We got them all.
Yeah, there's Dynasty Warriors for everybody. Um Infinity Nikki looked kind of interesting to me. The cutesy nature of it, but I was like, I don't know how to it's one of those like I'll probably wait till it's like a bargain bin type of deal
Mm-hmm.
before I even touch it. Ballad of Antara. That of course caught my attention because that's my style of gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Um I love me anything that's like big giant battles and souls like stuff like that. Just to me it captured my attention right away. Um Let's see, Where the Wind Meets, of course, caught my attention. Like as I'm watching it, I see this giant koi monster fly in the air. I'm like, sold. That's all I needed was this
Yeah.
giant koi.
Somebody
Uh,
mentioned in a review of the show that it seems like those games are really starting to become a lot more ubiquitous as well. Just kind of these more like samurai and, demon monsters or big yokai. I mean, the kind of whole Neo scene. There's a lot more of these, really good looking, uh, swinging a samurai sword around games that are coming out. I mean, it's not like that's anything new. We've had tons of that. I mean, most of this stuff started in Japan and came over here back in the day, and we've all been obsessed with that forever. But it does seem like some of these kind of new ones are blending together, and it's like, Where Winds Meet, I don't know, that's like not even like a grabbing title. Like I'm never going to remember that title unless I play the game and it's something that, is actually really good or a bunch of people are talking about.
yeah, I mean, I totally get that for sure. I mean, for me, it's kind of grown as like one of my favorite genres, like platforming and Soulsborne Sekiro, whatever we want to
Mhm.
call it, Demon Soulsborne Sekiro. Uh, yeah, it's just kind of grown to be at the top of my list. And then it's talking platformers. Astrobot was the other one that like really got my attention.
Everybody loved the way that looked, and everybody's been calling for this for a while. I mean, Astro seems like a great PlayStation mascot. I never played the VR Astrobot, but I did play some of Astro's Playroom or whatever, the one that comes with the PS5. That
It's a
was such a
blast.
great introduction to the DualSense control. It has so much great nostalgia running around. Like, and this is going to be all the same thing. I mean, you're flying around on like a big PS5 through space and meeting Parappa Rappa the robot and Nate Drake the robot. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then I have the PlayStation VR one, so at some point we could probably look into playing that
Maybe
one.
we'll
Of
do an
course, I played
Astro month.
Astro Month. I mean, we'll need one more Astrobot game
Well,
to
it'll
come
be a
out.
while, John.
Yeah, it'll at least be September of
The
2024. I think
PS6 will have enough titles.
that's true. Well, I mean, you never know. PS5 Pro and then a new Astrobot game after that. But yeah, I mean that's what really caught my attention was those three games in particular. A
Monster
lot
Hunter
of them look
Wilds for
great.
me, man.
Oh yeah, I figured as much on that. When I saw that, I was like, yeah, that's up Ryan's alley.
I mean, Monster Hunter Worlds was like my first like real intro to Monster Hunter that it just looks so good on the PS4. Like this one looks like it's going to be absolutely incredible and probably pull in a ton more players. I know that Monster Hunter Rise on Switch was really successful as well, so I think we're going to have a lot of people ready to jump into the monster hunting world. Other than that, I mean, Path of Exile 2, if you've never played Path of Exile or heard of it, get out from under a rock. It's basically Diablo, but made by this team in New Zealand, Grinding Gear Games. It's a really incredible game. Path of Exile 1 has so much content. It's a totally free to play game with, the only thing you could buy is cosmetics. It's been supported for years. Like every 3 months, they come out with like a whole new theme season that has brand new mechanics, and sometimes they take those mechanics and incorporate them back into the game. But they've really retooled this game, and they've had a few showings of this already, but that's going to be phenomenal. Other than that, the Silent Hill 2 remake, this was a much better showing for that, I think, than the first little trailer we got. I'm still not totally blown away, but I don't really have the nostalgia that so many people do have for this game. And I think Until Dawn remake, you could have tweeted about that. I don't think that's a big deal. I don't think that should have eaten up so much time at the showcase. I think that they just severely did not have good games to show or exciting games to show. And they just had to kind of shotgun whatever they could to fill time. Because overall, from what I've been hearing online, most people are ranking this like a D or maybe a C in terms of the total showcase, because there's just not really a whole lot here to make you want to stand up. Like when Astrobot's the most exciting announcement, and it just doesn't speak a lot of volume. Like, what are all your big first party studios doing right now, Sony? What are we going to play for the next year?
Yeah, and I agree with you on the Until Dawn. Like, could have been tweeted for sure, and it's a great game. Definitely loved it. But yeah, it's not worth having a whole big trailer and showcase, and even like God of War Ragnarok on PC.
And it's not going to be worth $70. Like if they try to sell that for $70, play the PS4 one. It's going to be the exact same game. Like who cares if it's not like as high res? Like
I don't even
really
know why
not
it's getting
the
a
most
remake.
Thing. Yeah.
Like in my opinion, it doesn't even need a remake. I don't know why they're doing that. Like graphically, it's fine. Like it's a decent game or good game. It's got okay graphics. Like it doesn't need, like the Quarry, for example, didn't have like the best graphics in the entire world. It was a good game. Like that's the focal point of those types of games, those QTE based games, is just a good story and like getting into that environment and seeing what the hell happens when, like, I don't know, you kill one character or another character dies, you make a certain decision. So,
and
in God of War
sell this to people twice.
Yeah.
Like
and
I'm not going to buy it again.
Same. And in God of War Ragnarok PC, I mean,
cool
I get
for PC
it.
People.
I get it, but yeah, it's like we already knew this was going to happen, so why did you need a whole like part of a showcase dedicated to God of War on PC? Like we knew it was coming, so why are you showcasing it? Like
because they had nothing else to talk about.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into our inflation deflation of the week. We played Ehrgeiz. God bless the ring.
Ehrgeiz.
I was developed. I hate you. It was developed. I need to just edit that out from now on. It was developed by Dream Factory, published by Square Electronic Arts, directed by Seiichi Ishii, and it was released in May of 1999. It is a fighting game, but an argument could be made that it is also an RPG/action adventure when we go into this. And it had a reception of a 5 to 7 out of 10. A lot of what I was seeing is like 7 to 7.6 roughly out of 10. Ryan, what's the game about?
Well, let's tell the people. So I mean, this is a fighting game, so you have the classic, every character kind of has their own arcade little story mode that they go through with whatever context you can glean from it. I mean, there is a whole bunch of stuff under the plot section of the wiki if you really want to know everybody's individual path. But other than that, there is also this side mode in the game that is like a weird dungeon crawler where you play as a couple of archaeologists trying to discover I'm assuming the sword from the main game. The sword is actually Ehrgeiz, and it's a powerful artifact that is supposedly related to the key to immortality. And I mean, the less said about that side mode, I guess the better in most people's opinions, but I found it kind of enjoyable. I mean, why don't I just start with that part of the game? And then we can double back to the fighting, because you know what a fighting game is. You know how that works. So
yep, go on.
This game has this whole interesting side mode where it's a not top down, like kind of side down, like Diablo
picture
style.
Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah. Action adventure dungeon crawler where you have these two characters. You get money, you get materia, because Final Fantasy is a part of this game, and you have to go through these dungeons and level up and get new gear and heal yourself and grow your stats and cast spells. And it actually, I had kind of fun with it. It was a little bit frustrating at first. I don't know, John, if you tried to go into the well with the octopus and got smashed instantly.
No, I did not.
Oh, yeah. So there's this well where you go down and there's this octopus that just instantly destroys you. So eventually I found out, hey, let's go up to the top of the mountain, go into this dungeon. And I actually made it through like the first 3 sections. It was really not that deep. You get like a weapon and you equip it, and then you've got like a basic weapon attack. You've got like a magic spell or like a charge magic spell. You're not really doing combos. It's not really bringing over like the full mechanics from the fighting game side of it, but it is very impressive to see a fighting game go ahead and develop maps, enemy types, you know, items. Like, they built out all of this in a
A
game that
town.
had nothing to do with any of that. Yeah, town,
Yeah.
NPCs, a save system,
Now this
bank.
is on the PS. This is on the PlayStation version. So the other versions of the game do not have this actually.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I totally, dude, I agree with you. So actually, for me, that was the most engaging part of the game. I preferred this
Mhm.
over to fighting.
Oh, the fighting was harsh.
Fighting wasn't bad. I got through arcade mode pretty easily, but I used
Did you
cloud,
beat it?
and it's kind of like a. No, I mean, I just stopped. I wanted to play more of the other parts of the game, so I just stopped arcade. But I got through like 10 pieces of arcade, whatever it came down to. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think Joe was my hardest one because it reminded me of Eddie Gordo with the whole
Mhm.
capoeira type style, which is fucking ridiculous when you play against the PC. But everybody else is fairly easy to defeat. So I think Joe, I probably went against like 3 or 4 times and then finally beat Joe.
Joe
So
was always
that was
like
all
my
good.
second match and not too much trouble. I was having a hard time with this the Prince Prince Droza or something, Prince Doza. He was
No
giving me a
issues.
hard
No
time.
issues. Yeah, no issues of mine with that guy. But Joe was my. But see, when it comes to fighting games, if I play anybody that plays like a Eddie Gordo style character, I get kind of screwed.
Yeah.
That's my weakness in fighting games. But overall, for me, the quest reminded me a little bit, and you're going to be like, "Really, John?" A little bit of like Dark Cloud in the way that the map kind of built. Wait, what was that?
Never played Dark Cloud.
Oh, okay. Now we got to do it for a podcast episode. So Dark Cloud, like you
That's a
go through
PS2
each
game,
of,
right?
yeah, it is, but it won't be the one that we play because I won't
Oh.
play the other one. I haven't played it yet. Which we'll get into at the end of this. But yeah, like Dark Cloud, you go through different dungeons and you find different items and you kind of uncover things like different artifacts to help rebuild the town, essentially, right? And so with this, you kind of go through. I don't know if it's as randomized, like I'm sure it's the same dungeon every time. But in Dark Cloud, it changes, not drastically, but enough. And so you kind of progress through the dungeon. You defeat certain enemies. You pick up items. You have a hunger bar, like you have to eat food to kind of increase your health. There is like a well type situation where you can regain your HP, which there was in this as well. So all of that kind of like built up, and it was like very simplistic combat as well, which kind of reminded me of Dark Clouds. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. I didn't get super far into it. It's more so just kind of like checking it out, see how it was, and I thought it was really cool overall. I would think that to me was a lot more enjoyable than the fighting. Fighting side though, it did very much so. Funny enough, before I jumped into Wiki to learn a little bit more about it, I ended up looking at it and saying, "Wow, this feels like Virtua Fighter," which is in terms of fighters probably one of my favorite fighters out there. And then turns out I was the designer of Virtua Fighter who designed this game, so it made 100% sense. So that's kind of where it stood for me. Like it was a fighting game. Each character has their own special abilities that they can use.
Well, and this
Very,
is
very
like,
basic fighting mechanics. Like it's one button fighting for the most
yeah,
part.
this is like a full 3D fighter where you're not even locked into like facing your opponent the whole time. Most of the stages have like multiple levels and areas. I've seen a lot of people really kind of equating this to like a Power Stone type game. In terms of the fighting, they had to sacrifice, like there's not like a lot of like complicated inputs or real true combos. It is a lot of just kind of like connect with what you can. I tried
Yeah.
a few different characters. I tried the Yoko, the yo-yo cop girl. I did try Tifa, Sephiroth, and Cloud, which that's really where this game got its recognition and sales from. This was one of those games that came packed with a Final Fantasy demo, the same as like Parasite Eve or Brave Fencer Musashi. Those those things always help to really propel the sales of a game that might not otherwise do as well. And I think in this situation, it really helped carry it because those other games are all really good games, actually. And that was just kind of a bonus that came with it. So this came out, I think, as an arcade game originally. And when it was released in arcades, there was actually a mechanism in the arcade that after so many days of being active, it would add those Final Fantasy characters into the roster. So as you went through and revisited the arcade, there would be like new characters, Final Fantasy characters available to draw you in. But I mean, you've got your standard, guy that looks like Jin from Tekken. You got your guy that looked or acts like Eddie Gordo. You've got kind of these like recognizable archetypes for fighters, the old man archetype. And it was fine. Everybody's got a weapon, which is kind of cool. Reminds me a little bit of like Soul Calibur, in the sense that you have a weapon you can use and it gives you like a whole kind of alternate set of attacks, or it might be like a specific one of the guys had like a gun. The shinobi guy has like a little blade but can also throw like a shuriken. So there's some interesting one of the guys even has like a landmine that he can like put on the ground. So there's lots more to it than just like a standard like 1v1 2D plane fighting game, but a lot less in terms of depth.
Yeah. And then there are, I don't know if you dove into them, there are
I
mini
did.
games. Okay. So
the race around the ring one was the only one that I was successful. So there's a mode where it's like, I think it's like just infinite fights, and you recover like your stamina in between fights, and you can get up to like having 3 health bars. I just saw it as more fighting, so I just dipped out of that one. The second one was really weird. So it's like a lot of these stages are pretty tight and pretty square. So they made like a little racetrack on it. So you basically just have to run in a loop around the stage 10 times to complete a lap, but you can do some like minor fighting to like mess with your opponent and stuff. That was, really pretty not much to it. I only tried like one of the modes. Then there was another that was a beach race. So it's you and another character at a start line, and then you just have to mash X to like finish a sprint. And then the final game mode was like a squares game, like a big board in a grid of squares, and it's like, okay, if there's a blue tile and then I put a red tile on either side of it, it'll turn that all the blue tiles in between them red. And so it's you versus an opponent trying to conquer the board and turn all the tile colors, but you can also like shove each other. And that was, pretty lame. I mean, none of these are really game changing, game moving kind of like mini games. They are very interesting to have as additions. And again, I do give recognition to these devs for like making all these different modes in what was, not the most advanced fighting game, but just like it was a lot of creativity and a lot kind of in that package.
Gotcha. Well, I did not play the mini games, obviously, as I said. I didn't get time to. But I can see why some people would enjoy, like specifically to race around the track and beat each other up, like why that would be a fun game to play. But for me, I think it really came down to really that like quest mode for me was like the top of this game. So looking at brass tacks, complete in box, $85. It peaked at $89.89. That's kind of a random coincidence. In April of last year, actually, and that's trending up. A loose copy will run you $33.36. That peaked at $45.78 in February of 2022. It's trending down. So this one's a tough one, mainly for the aspect of, so I'm trying to take a different approach on this. It's a Final Fantasy-like game in the sense of it's the same, there's character overlap, right? So if you're like a Final Fantasy aficionado, this is something you would definitely want to have in your collection because of that, right? Like Cloud's on the cover, right? Like it's a cool piece. It's a unique piece, given that you have a fighting game, mini games, and a quest mode that's all tied into it. So I think in that perspective, if you are a huge Final Fantasy fan and you don't have this in your collection and it's trending in the upward direction, I would say it's time to get it now. Is it worth it? Debatable. I think it's worth playing, and exploring it at $30 as a loose copy. But if you really want a nice minty copy at $85, I think you should get it now before it starts to go up in price even further.
Well,
I can't see them remaking this game. I can't see it being re-released in any capacity outside of like a digital only. So if you want a nice physical copy, I think now's the time to get it.
yeah. And I mean, the other thing here is that you're going to be looking at is, are you going to be getting a copy of the game and the case and the manual and the bonus disc with the Final Fantasy demo on there? Or is that going to be taken out and you're just really getting the game and everything related to that? So since it should have that bonus disc, like you were saying, if you're like a big time Final Fantasy collector, that would be worth shooting for. But
I don't
I
think
think
mine
that's
has
way
it,
too
actually.
much to pay if you don't have the actual complete inbox everything. I think that might be a little bit much for just the Ehrgeiz.
I don't think mine comes with a demo. Actually, I've got a version that doesn't have a demo with it. Like even
Oh,
on the
so maybe
back,
there
it
was
only
like a
has
couple of different versions that came out.
maybe. Yeah. So maybe it's a little cheaper if you go up one that doesn't have a demo, because that could be a reason why it'd be more expensive too. Um, that said, I think it's inflated overall price point. I don't think it's a good enough fighting game to hold on its own. I don't think it's a good enough quest mode to hold on its own. And of course, mini games. I mean, you should never really look at mini games as the central point of purchasing a video game. So if you're looking at it from that
Unless it's
lens,
WarioWare.
yeah, it's unless it's WarioWare, it's true. So if you're looking at it from that lens, I would say this game is inflated. If you're looking at it
Mhm.
from a standpoint of I really want to get a Final Fantasy piece, then this is probably the right time.
Do it while you can.
Cool. Yeah, so we are inflated on that one for a week. So our next 4 games that we'll be looking at are McFarlane's Evil Prophecy on the PlayStation 2. So you'll notice the theme here in a little bit. Lollipop Chainsaw on the PlayStation 3. And then we are going to have Dead Cells on the PlayStation 4. And then we're going to have Ryan's favorite. I'm so happy I get to play this game with you and tie you into all of Agony, Gollum on the PlayStation 5. So we're going to explore that too.
Why you do this
All
to
right.
us?
You're welcome. Yeah, I saw it on the shelf. I had my hands on a couple PS5 games, and then I just kind of like just gently touched the spine of Gollum. I was like, it's this one. This is the one that we're gonna play.
I gotta
So
work on my impression for the intro. It burns us in this week's Inflation Deflation Challenge.
that'll be a good one. Yeah, I'm excited for that. So we'll see how it goes, and I'm sure my wife will sit back and watch us in pain as we go through that. So
Oh man,
that'd be good. All right. Well, this has been episode 289 of the Game Deflators Podcast. My name's John.
I'm Ryan.
And thanks for listening.